what I want to show you just really quickly is how you could look at that page that we just ended up with and visualize it in a real browser, right? So we have this paragraph that scrolls, right? And this paragraph is in the body tag. You can actually look at this with the Chrome inspector. If you're using Google Chrome, you can right click and inspect this element or this page. And what it will do is it will open up in the right side or on the bottom, depending on how your stuff is set up. It'll open up the inspector. And what you can look at over here is it's got the HTML, and then down below it'll have corresponding CSS for whatever element happens to be selected at the time. And you can see these little drop downs. I can twirl that down, and now if I hover, right now I'm hovering over and I selected the paragraph tag that's in the HTML side, and you'll notice what happened on the left side of the screen is that while I'm inspecting the paragraph, it shows me a visual sort of display of color that it's telling me like where the margin is, where the border is, where the padding is, and what the actual element is. And if you look down here in the lower right, we have this visual inspector. You can sort of move this around. And if you don't like the way this is set up, you can move the different windows around like this, okay, so that you can actually see better. Maybe your screen's a different size and you want to dock this differently. You see these three little bullet marks up here. You can choose where to dock it. We can dock it down below. Now we have to go back down here. We could choose to dock it completely individually, separate from the window if you wanted to do it that way. All right, I typically don't do it that way. I'm going to dock it back to the right side. Okay, and what that's going to do for me is you can look at the little diagram out here. The orange is the margin. And then the yellow is the border, and it's hard to see the yellow, but if you'll notice, the border here is actually black, and when I hover over the paragraph, it sort of is having like a little yellow overlay over it so that it sort of looks like this brown color. Well, that's how it's telling me that it's the yellow part is the border. The green part is the padding on the paragraph element, and the blue area is where the actual element is taking up its space without any of the other stuff applied to it. All right, so if you were to take the padding away, the border away, and the margins away, that's, right now that's how big the element is. But if you took all that other stuff away, which we can actually come down here and do, see this is currently selected up here where it says P in the HTML, and then it'll show me the active CSS that's being generated down here. And if I wanted to see, for instance, if I took off the padding, that's what would happen. If I took off the border, you can see it without the border. If I took off the margin, you see that's what would happen. If I took off the width, you see that that's what it would go to. And so you can kind of start to interact with this in live mode, and then this is one of the ways that you can really easily and quickly tell if you wanted to change the padding, say maybe to 5%, maybe we would like that better. It'll help you see visually how everything ends up looking, and then maybe we want the width to actually be something like 80%, right? And so you can start to play with this, and you need to realize that if you refresh the page, or if you were to click a link on the page or something like that, then you're going to lose all of the changes that you make here. That's really important to remember. But the thing that's nice about this is that it's very low stakes. Changing, you can modify stuff in real time. You get feedback to see if what you're doing is actually correct and if it's working the way you want it to. And it's great to create a hypothesis of what you think is going to happen if you change something. Try it and then see in real time interactively if it changes it for you. This is one of the absolute best techniques that you can use as a designer and developer to interactively test your designs and also see if your understanding of what's happening on the page is actually correct. Instead of modifying a separate file, saving it, then refreshing the page, and not knowing immediately if it worked, this is really nice because you're also not having to save a page and save things into a page that maybe weren't really changes that were going to help you. This way you'll know immediately. Okay, there is something else I want to show you. There are a couple of things I want to show you so that if you decide that you want to use this, that you don't get a little, overwhelmed by all of the stuff that's on the screen. So I'm just going to show you what these different things do. Not everything, okay? I'm going to show you what the important stuff is. So right now, what we're looking at are the styles that are being currently applied. And what's also true is that if you look here, all right, this is the P selector that is corresponding with this particular P tag. And right now we're looking at a really simple page, which is good. Now, I want to show you, you can also, if there's a color applied to something, like in this case the background, you can change it by either clicking on the little color picker, or if you know what the hexadecimal number is, you can sort of like go in here and you can change it by hand, right? The other thing too is that if you hover over this where it says images, BG, PNG, you can actually click on that. Excuse me, let's do this. You can right click on it, and you could say, for instance, open link in new tab, and you could actually look at the picture. That's the actual picture file. And so you can kind of see that it's technically it's a small image that's being stretched out and very blurred, but it also looks very pink here, whereas here it doesn't look as pink. And part of that is because it has a level of transparency, and you can see that it's got a level of transparency when I hover it. That's what those checkerboard patterns are. The other thing is that you can tell because this is a pink color behind it. If I were to, click on this and, for instance, I'm just going to delete that. If I cut it, you can see that the pink tone goes away because I just removed the background color. And by the way, this is shorthand. This background right here, this is a background property, and it's shorthand for all of these values that are attached. So for instance, it's telling me that it's a URL, and then with a space in between, it says no repeat, a space in between. It means it's centered vertically, centered horizontally, or centered horizontally and centered vertically. And it's also fixed. Fixed means that if I were to scroll the page, that the element or the picture behind it isn't going to scroll, okay, but everything else would scroll. And so if we wanted to see that in action, I could change this width back to 50%. Let's try that. Okay, and then you see if I scroll, you notice how the picture isn't moving, but the text is. Well, that's because of this element right, or this value right here on the background property right here where it says fixed. That's keeping the background image fixed in place. Okay, so you can learn a lot about a page too. So if you want to see how somebody else has styled something, you can use this. But over here where it says P, if you go all the way over right here, it's telling you where the style is being set, okay? And if you click on that, it takes you directly to the place where the style is. In this case, it's embedded up in the head of the page. All right, so that can be a little confusing, but what I want you to notice is that it jumped straight to where that paragraph selector is declared. And notice that it jumped over here to the sources tab. All right, if you go over and look at sources, this is where students kind of get confused sometimes. You look at the sources and it'll show you all your different sources, okay? So I'm just going to go back to elements. So if you ever click on that and you feel like you've gotten lost, you can always find your way back if you click here on elements, all right? Sources is going to show you all of your different resource files that the document is using, whether it's CSS or JavaScript or something else, right? Okay, now the last thing I want to mention to you is, let's say that there's a style that you want to apply, but it doesn't already exist on the page. Like, we can monkey around with these. I could also click down below, like I for instance could click at the end of this, and then it allows me to start typing a new property. And it does do some hinting so that you can do auto completion. So for instance, I could do something like border radius. Let's add border radius since we don't already have one on there. And you'll notice that as I started typing, right, it gives me all these different code hinting options. And I'm just going to keep on typing because there's so many. And then as soon as I hit the dash, it gives me a whole bunch more. And then I could start with the R. And then it gives me a lot fewer. And so I could arrow over with my right arrow, and then it auto completes, and then I need to hit the colon key, not semicolon, but the two dots, the colon key, and it advances me to my value for that property. And for border radius, let's say that we're going to do something like, I don't know, like a 10 pixel radius. And then you see that it puts like a 10 pixel border radius all the way around so that it now has rounded corners, right? You could change that and go, okay, well, let's see what it looks like at 5 pixels. Maybe that's a little bit better for you. I don't know, whatever. But you see that I was able to interactively add this. Now, just remember that that isn't going to save it into your document. What you need to remember is that if you really want this, you need to go and copy this rule that you added. You should copy your changes. If you really like them and you don't want to have to remember everything you changed, you can copy your changes. And so, you could copy this and paste it into your actual CSS, and that would be okay. Now, the other thing that I want to show you too is that sometimes, like, let's say that we changed a whole bunch of this stuff, and let's for instance, let's take this width back to 80, and we have some other changes that we had made, and let's say that we liked these changes a lot, and we want to actually copy all of them. Well, I could do this. That's one option, right? But I could also go directly to the source, and you see right here next to P, it shows you exactly the line number that it's on and in what document that it's on, right? And so if I click that, it'll take me directly to where the original source code is written. And now, because it's currently updated not in the real file, okay, not in the real file, but just in this rendered view right now, I can copy the rendered source code that has been modified. I can copy it straight from here. So you can use a shortcut command, right? Or you can use the right click and you could say copy, and then you could take this entire rule, right? And you could paste that into your CSS style sheet. So that's one option. Now what happened, and this always throws people off, is that everything changed when I clicked that. How do I get back to where I was? Well, notice what it did is it put you inside of the actual page, the actual real document. It's called p.html, and these styles in this particular demonstration, you can see that they are embedded in a style tag at the top of the page. All right, and a lot of times if you're doing it differently, where it's not just like a demonstration single file, then it'll take you to an external style sheet. That's more realistic. It's more likely what's going to happen. But it shows you the file, and also notice that now sources is underlined with this, right in my browser, it's blue underline. That means that it jumped from elements where we were to sources when it opened this. So if you need to get back to where you were, you can always click on this elements tab. The other thing I want to show you too about this, it's really good, is that off to the left, while we're still in sources, right, But just remember, this is all interactive and it's live, but it is not something that gets saved into your document. You have to do that yourself. Okay, that's the end of the demo.